I mean, I'm quite, I suppose, quite privileged in the fact that because he was the sort of guy, when he came in, he lit a room. He wasn't an attention seeker. He just, when he entered the room and started talking, people listened. I know he was big, but I was really fortunate. My youngest son, we knew him as farmers anyway, but my youngest son was at school with Christopher, Doddie's little brother. So every now and again we share the school run. It was usually Nanny or Jock, that was Doddie's dad. We'd be on a school run, we'd be doing it. But occasionally Doddie would get the job to go and collect the wee one from the school as well. So he was all just such a cheery guy, but a really, really funny guy. But somebody that people would listen to. And I mean, you'd know that as well. You're a farmer from the borders as well. You're a border family. He knew everybody. But no, Doddie was just that character. I was really lucky in the job at SRU as well. I was just chatting as we do. When we went down to Wales to play for the Doddie Weir Cup, and Doddie was still going around, and Gary Armstrong was looking after him. And Gary came across to me and he said, right, you're looking after him now, you'll need to keep him in check, make sure he's okay. And at the end of the night, Doddie had Warren Gatland and Gregor Townsend down in pints in a boat race, both refusing, desperately trying to get out of it. And he said, no, you have to. Sean Edwards, your Wales coach, who said, no, I'm driving, I've got a 40-mile drive. And Doddie said, doesn't matter, I can get a taxi. Made him down a pint with some of the other coaches. And then he had Mark Dodson, the chief exec of SRU, up with the Welsh chief exec, but they had to drink a whiskey as well as a pint. And that was him. He just had everybody in the room eating out his hand.
He was always the boy in the bus too, in Edinburgh, going to the dinner or whatever, in his kilt, and he'd have a bottle of whiskey in one sock and a bottle of gin in the other sock, and then just make sure everybody got a top on the way to the dinner.
He loved his whiskey. He did that. It was quite embarrassing. My wife was sitting in the Royal Box at Murrayfield, and you've got to be kind of on your best behaviour. I was sitting a few along with Princess Anne, and there's Doddie. I could see at the corner of my eye with my wife, and they've got plastic pint tumblers, and he's filling them up with some bottle somewhere, and she's tipping the glasses. He's just getting his kill. He just loved life. He just loved, I don't know, just taking the mickey out of people, but not taking the mickey out, but just making people laugh.
He was my coach throughout my career was Jim Telfer, so Scotland B, Scotland and the Lions, and Jim was a tough man, and of course Doddie had him at Melrose, but I think Doddie was about the only guy that could get Jim kind of smiling, could get away with stuff, and Jim would make an example of him, but he was always coming back for more. So
I can remember that video of the Lions tour,
with
Jim Telfer doing the kangaroo court, and they said, man spotted out, Doddie we have spotted out, 2:00 in the morning, in a nightclub, in the middle of South Africa. What have you got to say for yourself? And he stood up and said, mistaken identity. 6'9", white hair. Absolutely. Well done, Doddie. Superb. And had him laughing.
It was my father or something, did he say?
They said it was his father. Brilliant.
His opening line when he was speaking was usually, because he's 6'9", and this could be cut, but he's 6'9", and ladies after a few Prosecco's would always sidle up to him and say, are you in proportion? He says, if I was in proportion, I'd be 12 foot tall. He's a bad boy.
Oh dear. And Rob, you had a wee story about him as well, didn't you? When you asked Rob Wainwright about him.
Oh yes, I was going to present to some schools, and I said, Rob, I need a story about him that'll engage with the school children. He said, well, he ran a septic tank business, and he'd go around all the farms emptying the septic tanks, and I think his strapline was, your number twos are my number one priority. I remember him as a player, as a Welsh supporter. He was all elbows and knees, and he'd be like a stag, knocking people over with his big antlers, which were his elbows and his knees. Terrifying sight for a Welsh person.
Yeah. I was with Martin Johnson on Thursday night at the Wooden Spoon dinner, and Andy Nichol was doing a Q&A with John O on the stage, and he asked him about 97 Lions tour, and of course Doddie got that horrific callus injury, and whether he would have made the test side. And I think there was a real possibility that he would have played the test. He was that good. So not only A big lad, but a good lad.
But a good player as well. I remember talking about big lads. I remember seeing him and Peter Wright, who's a Lasswade boy. I met the two of them at the West End. The kids had been doing something, and we stopped for a burger. Went in a McDonald's before you could have a drive-through or whatever. And there were two guys sitting at the table. The unmistakable Doddie Weir's back, and I could see Peter Wright the other side. And I walked up to the table, and I've got my two kids with me. We put the order, and we're standing waiting on it. And I looked at the table and I thought, my God, the whole team must be here. And I started speaking to the boys and I said, so who else is with you? And they said, oh, no, they just us. They must have had about half a dozen Big Macs each and all these other stuff. They'd been at a Scotland training session.
Oh.
And there you go. So good, healthy food for athletes. Please, children, don't take that don't do that. But there you go. They had a stack of food in front of them.
I heard that he was quite skillful horse rider and he used to take part in gymkhanas and stuff. I'd love to have seen him on a horse. Did anybody here see him on a horse?
Never saw him on a horse.
Never saw him on it. It would have to be a big horse, so his feet would be dragging.
Yeah. Can you imagine it? It would have been quite an entertaining sight, wouldn't it? He was quite skilled at it, apparently.
Yeah, he was.
Oh, I think that's...
that was his first love, actually. It was
I've read that, yes.
Yeah. Popular stuff. Very popular in the Borders. Quite a lot of them. And a lot of the players still.
Yeah.
Good horsemen and...
Yeah. Common ridings and whatever. Yeah,
definitely. I think Darcy Graham was one of the new lads. He's pretty keen on his horses, and Hoggy was keen on his horses. And yeah.
He's given us like a wealth of memories in terms of the Doddie rides we've been involved in as well. For example, on the last ride where we were cycling from Cardiff up to Edinburgh, we had a couple of your pals, the Lions. We had
Paul
Wallace. We had Rob, of course, and the England captain, we just mentioned now.
Martin Johnson. Yeah.
Martin Johnson with us. And I think we went to stay at one rugby club in Mayford, which is Cobra Rugby Club. And we were all sleeping on the floor in the rugby club. But Martin Johnson, I think, and Paul Wallace shared a camper van. So Martin Johnson had the bottom bunk, and Paul Wallace had to climb up the staircase to get a little bit above the driver and catch up in there. That was his sleep. I think we only had a 2 or 3 hour break. But anyway, Paul Wallace, I said to him the next morning, I just was setting off, I said, did you sleep well, Paul? And he goes, well, not really, he said. I said, what happened? He said, well, I forgot to have a pee. And I thought about getting up and I looked down and it was Martin Johnson there and I was so terrified of him. I just lay there, held it, but I couldn't sleep at all.
Another man about 6'9". They are daunting characters, though, aren't they? But Martin Johnson does look like a daunting character, but Doddie Weir never did look like that, did he? He just was so approachable, and everybody you speak to that's ever spoken to the man has got a funny story or something nice to say about him. He epitomised it all. And we talked about Rob Burrows there earlier on, which leads into Kevin Sinfield, who's gone above and beyond for the MND charity. Absolutely fantastic guy. But that whole group was gelled and brought together. I think Stephen Darby, the footballer, there was Rob and Doddie Weir initially, Rob Burrows and Doddie Weir on breakfast telly. BBC were fantastic with Sally Nugent and all that stuff they did. But Doddie was the one. He was the glue, wasn't he? He was the one that stuck it all together and just took it to that.
You're so right. They actually said it was Judy Newton, the MND chief nurse in Scotland, who said this last week, that Kevin Sinfield got Doddie to come down and see Rob, because Rob had kind of given up. Yeah. And Doddie came down and said, look, we've got to fight this and whatever. And it completely changed Rob's.
You could see he was the driving force. And he was still, for all he was suffering, he still had that twinkle in his eye. He was up to mischief.
Well, at the very end, Ian, his great pal Carl Hogg was on a bike when Kevin Sinfield started from Murrayfield and did that run to, where did he run to? Was it Twickenham? Well, he did about
crazy.
Whatever. It was a crazy 5 marathons in a row, and Doddie could barely speak at that stage, and Carl was in his lycra on his bike and everything, and Doddie whispered to him, come down and speak to him, and he just, you're a fat.
Typical Doddie. Yeah, brilliant. What character. Oh dear. Yeah, sadly missed. But, we talked about this briefly the other day. We were asked by Bruce Aitchison on his podcast. It seemed a kind of sad thing to say, but Doddie has grown in stature since he passed. It's like he's going to touch another generation now. His memory, his legacy will live on. He had that much effect on people.
Well, we had Rachel Sharp from the foundation at this charity day, and she was saying they're actually raising more money now than when he was alive, which is fantastic.
Incredible.
I think their biggest month, the other month, when Kenny Logan raised almost £500,000 and whatever, it's fantastic. So.
Brilliant. No, he was an inspiration.
Yeah.
He's inspired us.
Yes, he has indeed.
Yeah.